At 5 minutes to explain how I believe the fabric of reality actually works. So, what the heck am I all talking about? What came help bring this about, if you would? Well, I put out the whole hyperbolic reality. Is that a hyperbolic statement? I think that depends upon the observer. Now, the fabric of reality itself. I'm proposing that perhaps the hyperbolic figure eight knot and or its complement might just kind of weave into what we know as potentially space-time. I know that the Wolfram Physics team has put out there the concept of space atoms or something like that. It's hyperbolic atoms, whatever more fundamental building block you can. All I know is, based upon Thad Roberts' analysis, shout out to Thad, you're basically talking about something where you can essentially derive the Planck constants. And if that's what we've derived as, well, this is what, as far as we can tell, it's the smallest things in the universe, well, that maybe that actually means something. So let's take a look at what we got over here. And this is something that actually really caught my attention here. And this is brought to us from the Institute for Advanced Study. And this was a workshop involving Elisabetta Matsumoto. My apologies for butchering your name, ma'am. But essentially, her and her collaborator, they were working on knitting, which, oh my God, how dare we actually go back to something that may have been potentially ancient, potentially may have been viewed as more of something for a particular gender, if you would. I know. It might only explain everything. Now, as we can see here, basically what they found is depending on the stitching that you had, oh my God, I don't need to see any of that. That's terrible. You don't want to look at me. Basically, if you're looking at the stitching here, depending on how things are set up, basically, you at least need one longitudinal and one latitudinal. And depending on how it actually fits in there, it's actually weaving together. And the very interesting thing is, depending actually on the type of knot that you actually utilize, oh, look, it actually kind of looks like the hyperbolic figure eight. Oh, looky there. I know. It's very fancy. And you can see all these different dimensionalities and everything. But as far as actually, where was it? Their findings for the stitching. Yep. Okay. Depending on how things are actually woven together, depending on actually one of the things they hadn't done yet is if it actually been washed, which brings up a whole other can of worms. But essentially, depending on how it's tied together, they actually get different results as far as the stretchiness, the firmness as well. So this got me to thinking. I'm like, all right, maybe it's not necessarily all different knots. However, what happens if it's a bit of stretch to it? Could that potentially explain some of the redshift that we might actually be seeing there? Because now what might actually do that? It's like, all right, well, if gravity is affecting everything, it seems to kind of follow the inverse square law of Newton and everything. What if space-time itself was actually affected depending on how much potential gravity it experiences? What if it is like a fabric, if you would, in that once it gets stretched a little bit, maybe there's a little bit more stretch to it. Maybe it's more likely to go out. Or if we were to use the analogy of cleaning something, what happens when light traverses along space-time itself? What happens if the energy from that light in and of itself does something to the fundamental manifold of reality itself? That'd be pretty cool. I'm not sure I've really heard anyone say anything about that yet. But then again, I was utilizing the final Kamehameha from Vegito Blue to help ask, wait a second, what if light actually spins around? Then I found a video from Roger Penrose from, like, I don't know, 10 years ago, where he was basically saying the same thing. I'm like, oh, it is like a special beam cannon. I need to start an anime physics series. I think that would actually help engage a lot of folks. All right, with 30 seconds left, we're going to pop over here. That's the figure eight knot complement. Essentially, let's take a real quick look at that. What the heck is that? Basically, that little thing around the outside that they have basically cut open, it's basically a torus. What's a torus? Basically a donut. You probably don't want to eat that donut. It looks like it's made of plastic. But as you can see, it's like kind of warping around there. I'm like, all right, so if we were to account for all the fundamental forces, have a unified field theory, might we end up with that? I have no idea. It sounds pretty cool. My alarm's going off. You know what that means. I love you all. I see you life at the Love Shack and Joe Franco. Shout out to my patrons Joe Franco and Dave M. This broadcast is helped made possible by viewers like you. I'm not going to hop onto Fat Steven Seagal's channel and talk about Babylon 5. I'm late. Don't tell him. Peace out, everybody. Hope.